good to go?
We're good to go, Leader.
Righty-ho, thank you very much. Good evening, councillors, and good evening those that are watching us from near and afar. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the... good evening, councillors, and good evening... Could someone please turn off their YouTube? Thank you. All right. Welcome, everybody, to this virtual meeting of the Executive. My name is Councillor John Ward. I'm leader of the Council, and I shall be chairing this meeting of the Executive. I'm supported this evening by a number of officers, the Chief Executive, Tom Horwood, Strategic Directors, Graham Clark and Annie Wrighton, Head of Policy and Governance, Robin Taylor, and the Borough Solicitor, Daniel Bainbridge. Please use the hand raise function within Zoom to indicate if you wish to speak, and please keep your microphone muted unless you are speaking. If any members in the meeting lose their connection temporarily, we will suspend the meetings. We will pause the meeting rather than suspend it to allow time to rejoin the meeting. If the webcast stream fails, then we will adjourn until we are able to reset the connection. Item 1 on our agenda is minutes of the meeting of the 8th of July, which are published in front of you and on the website. Could executive members please quickly unmute their microphones and indicate agreement to the minutes?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much, members. I now come to apologies for absence. We have had one apology from Councillor Liz Townsend. Moving to item 3, declarations of interest. We have none from members of the Executive, but we have one from Councillor Potts, who is a member of the Nuffield Health Farnham. Does anybody else have a last-minute declaration of interest? Thank you very much. We will move on to item 4, questions from the public. There are no questions listed from members of the public. Item 5, questions from members. There are no questions listed from members. We will then move on to item 6, leaders and portfolio holders, updates and announcements. I have very little to say, as I said most of it at council recently. A lot of my time has been taken up with the sudden interest, shall we say, in devolution and unitary authorities, with Surrey joining a number of other county councils in jumping the gun a little and putting in a request to be considered as a unit, as a single county unitary. That will be discussed later in the meeting, so I don't wish to say any more. So I will then ask any members of the Executive if they would like to speak, starting with Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Leader. I think you're going to be hearing enough from me later on in the agenda, but in Councillor Townsend's absence, if I can just grab an opportunity to remind those here and watching that the second round of the local authority discretionary grant scheme for small businesses is open. And for this round, we have been able to use our discretionary powers to expand this for this round of the scheme to businesses with a rateable value or fixed property related costs of up to £55,000, and businesses can go online at our website to apply, and I encourage people to apply. Applications close at 9 AM on Monday the 3rd of August. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Merriweather. Councillor Williams.
Thank you. Very briefly, Leader, just to give a brief progress report on the ongoing development of the Climate Emergency Plan. 2 officers of the Council, Fatini Vickers and Delma Bryant. I've been working with officers across the council on developing the climate emergency action plan to provide a more coherent approach and move forward on the key projects that will serve as a catalyst and leverage key activities, particularly around active transport, community energy, and very important in the light of the financial position about which we will hear more this evening, an invest to save projects that will provide the sort of financial benefits as well as carbon reduction. Public consultation and engagement is a key part of the strategy. And whilst the Climate Emergency Action Plan and the Sustainability Strategy have been out on the website for some time, in August we are beginning a process of public consultation and engagement on the strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Councillor Rosamond.
Thank you, Chair. As we've all said, there was a certain announcements made last week at full council. Waverley's council's housing officers continue to support the vulnerable and the shielded, but it is unclear at this time what will be required by the government, if anything, when shielding comes to an end this Saturday. We do have preparations in place, however, should there be a second wave. Redevelopment at Oxford Ridge Site A is progressing really well, with more tenants moving in. And over the next 4 weeks, we've got an average of 4 households a week moving in, and the feedback to date has been fantastic. Also, as reported last week, Waverley housed over 30 households at the height of the pandemic. And as of today, I understand that most have now been moved out of B&B and hotels and into more suitable accommodation. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Rosamond. Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Leader. I think it would be helpful if I gave an update on the update we got from Chris Nicholson at yesterday's Brightwell's programme board meeting. The site, of course, was completely closed during the lockdown, but it's been open now for about 6 weeks. When it first opened, they were only able to work at about 30% of their previous capacity. In the most recent week, they were working about 80%. But this obviously means that there's going to be a delay in the opening of the project, of the development. It was originally due to open in the spring of next year, around about April or so. It's unlikely now it will open before about next September. We don't have a full new schedule from Chris yet. There's been a bit of a change in the management team we're dealing with. The previous managing director of Chris Southern has moved on to a new job in Chris. We've also lost the previous senior programme manager. So they're working on a complete new schedule, and we'll know in about 4 weeks' time when the new schedule, what it will be. They've reaffirmed their total commitment to the project. As far as lettings are concerned, they still have the sites, they still have the tenants who've agreed to take places in the site, and they're still looking to get more tenants, and they're still portraying confidence that they'll be able to open the site round about next October. A very small point that people might be interested in, they've withdrawn the NMA that they put in to cut down 3 of the iconic trees on the site. And so they've withdrawn that, which got, as we know, a large number of rejections from the general public. So that's a quick update on Brightwells. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Palmer.
Very briefly, just an update on previous reports on the position of our parking. Usage is continuing to creep up as life returns perhaps to a greater level of normality, but it is still well under capacity, and we are not proposing to make any changes to parking charges for the time being, despite the overall situation, because we want to protect the interests of the shops, and also there's no point in driving away the additional custom which has just started to come in. We'll keep it under review.
Thank you, Councillor Beeman.
Thank you very much, Leader. Just like to report that the Waverley Hopper service is now resumed and that every effort is being made to try and encourage people to use this service again, so we can get them out of their homes and to enjoy life more. So that's the report, Leader.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to say a few words about business transformation here at Waverley, starting with the recent announcement that this autumn the government are to introduce a white paper on local government devolution. In advance of that white paper, Surrey County Council has contacted the Secretary of State asking that consideration should be given to a Surrey-wide unitary council, which would of course abolish the role of borough councils such as Waverley. Some may say that Surrey County Council, which is located in Greater London, is too remote to be truly accountable to the 125,000 residents here and rural Waverley. Even as late as last week, the government said that councils must be protecting the characteristics of an area and serving its communities in a democratic and accountable manner. Here at Waverley, however, our direction of travel is to get even closer to the understanding of the needs of our residents. So we are transforming our approach to customer service. In place of the current individual service departments, such as housing, for example, who have their own individual customer service teams, we will be moving these functions into one fully integrated customer service centre. This transformation will include our master data management work, where all customer data held across the council will be integrated into one golden record for each resident. That's about creating a better understanding of our customer needs and about making the customer journey more efficient and easier for our residents. And I look forward to this work being completed during the next 6 months. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Leader. Just to very quickly update in terms of corporate strategy, that continues at a pace, and I will update more on that one at the next full council. In Councillor Townsend's absence, I will just mention the release of the proposed governance structure for Dunsfold Park, which Liz will be chairing. Now, obviously, that was something that was delayed, the review of which was delayed due to COVID, has now been undertaken several weeks ago by the executive and has been now distributed to all councillors. It includes the borough councillors local to Dunsfold area and also includes representatives from Alfold, Bramley, Cranley and Dunshfold parishes. So we should now have a fully staffed and engaged board to handle Dunsfold going forward. That's all from me, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you to Councillor Follows. We will then move on to agenda item 7, contingency revised budget, which is in the hands of Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Leader. So the report on pages 9 to 26 of the pack should be or is familiar to most of us on this Zoom, but it does contain quite a bit of detail that, with your indulgence, I'd like to recap and summarize the headlines at least, especially for our guests who are watching now or later remotely. So hopefully you can all see the screen and recognize some of these slides. Please shout if you can't. But just to recap the timeline very quickly, on the 18th of February, acknowledged to be a challenging general fund budget within the context of an unfair funding environment. And indeed at that council, members noted that the budget included nearly £1 million of efficiencies and savings. And we agreed that there was a need for united lobbying of central government for us to be allowed to keep a fairer share of the business rates we collect for the government from Waverley's businesses. Okay. Let me just try and get this to go forward. Just bear with me. There we go. Right. So in May, we, the executive, considered real time, if you like, a first assessment of the financial impact of the pandemic, which was declared in March, as part of our overall response to coronavirus. Even then, at that earlier stage, it was evident that the financial impact on the Council's general fund, its funding of all non-council house activities for this year, 2021, alone would be unprecedented, to say the least, and that there would be further consequences beyond 2021 for the medium-term financial plan in the years beyond. We must also remind ourselves that this emergency is very far from being over. We're still only in July, not much more than a quarter into the financial year, and many elements of the pandemic's final impact financially to date have yet to settle or resolve themselves, let alone what other events may yet unfold. So on the 8th of July, I reported to the executive that a first draft contingency revised budget for this year, 2021, had been prepared to address the estimated in-year budget gap of £6.6 million. That draft contingency budget was detailed in a public report for the Value for Money Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting on the 13th of July, which was preceded by an all members briefing on it on the 6th of July. So as at today, at least, that estimated in-year budget gap of £6.6 million, which is equivalent to 60% of our take of council tax revenue, remains unchanged. And the primary cause is the loss of revenues, which we've suffered as a consequence of lockdown. Now, this table summarises a lot of detail in Annex 1 to the report. The most significant impact for us financially is that from closing and now reopening our leisure centres, and that is as described for us in detail in Exempt Annex 5 to the pack. Our assumptions in this regard and in other regards, including as to car parking, have still to be tested as we continue to emerge from lockdown. But as of today, volatility aside, we can not see any changes in the underlying trend to challenge the assumptions that we've got so far. So in response to the crisis, and while still very much in the thick of the non-financial demands on us of the pandemic, we launched another comprehensive review of our finances. At that time, while the council had received £1.3 million of direct government COVID grant, we were still awaiting detail on what further support might be forthcoming, given the government's promises that we would not be left out of pocket by the pandemic or their response to it. Our contingency planning had to prepare for the worst, even as we hoped for better. We therefore identified further emergency savings on top of those already in the budget. And we also identified reserves that could be tapped for additional emergency funding if needed. Our priorities in this regard were to limit, if not avoid, the damage done by the pandemic's impact to us, our services and our residents, and to make any surviving adverse impact as temporary as possible. Since the 8th of July executive, we've learned that the council will receive a further £146,000 from the £500 million grant announced on the 2nd of July. But to date, we still do not know how much we will be eligible to receive under the income loss grant announced at the same time. We've always taken the view that direct grants are not the only single mechanism available to central government to provide us with the support, and that some of the issues we'd already identified, including our unfair share of retained business rates and our unfair exposure to business rate appeals, were alternatives and more sustainable options, and we still live in hope. So, absent that basic clarity on the remaining formulaic grant, we've proposed the contingent mitigation measures, which are summarised in this table, which are detailed in Annex 2 to the pack. In addition to the government grants we've received, we'll reduce our in-year spending by £2.3 million, including 1.3 million in service cost savings and £1 million in reduced contributions to reserves. Out of an abundance of caution, we continue to explore further options for savings, and Annex 3 of the report describes some of those options which have been currently identified, but as of now have not yet been developed sufficiently to be banked, if you like. So the balance of the estimated gap, £2.9 million, will have to be met from our existing usable general fund reserves, and the impact on them of that is detailed in Annex 4 to your report. It is important to stress how unsustainable almost all of these emergency contingency measures are. While we will try to bank whatever benefits we can, for the most part, there will be nasty consequences on our ability to maintain and invest in our future capacity to deliver services which will be impacted for years to come. In slide 6, I've summarised, therefore, the contingency revised general fund budget in the format that we normally use. And you will see total net service cost, that is net of income from rentals, fees and charges, is going to be nearly 50% over budget due to that lost income. That increase is being met by a net depletion in our reserves, plus the government grants. So that's 2021. We were already pre-COVID looking at a situation where we had an annual budget shortfall rising to £5.4 million per year by 23-24, as contractions in our funding accelerated faster than our cost increases, mainly due to inflation. And of course, COVID is going to make that situation a lot more serious. Unfortunately, with COVID, like so many things, there are elements outside of our control. Economically, both national, local, and sectoral economic situations will change. Socially, we do expect an increase in demand for social services, particularly as there are questions over whether the charitable and the voluntary sector will have the capacity even to deal with their past workload before you even think about increases as a result of COVID. And then, of course, there's political uncertainty. We already faced uncertainty over local government funding, not least the government's lack of preparation for the economic consequences of the pandemic. But of course, we now face uncertainties over the structure of local government itself. So Leader, no report or presentation by me can do justice to the severity of the financial impact this pandemic will have on the council. But it's a credit to the council's officers and staff that we've been able to manage what we have as we have thus far, while not only continuing with the normal duties and responsibilities of the council, but also taking on an additional workload, for example, in the finance team, administering the grant schemes that the government required us to do from scratch. But I would like, as well as thanking the team, to thank the other councillors and members, including not least the Value for Money ONS committee, for all of their valued and constructive feedback through the process. I'm going to leave it there until the extraordinary council on the 11th of August. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Merriweather. I have one person down to speak, Councillor Julia Potts.
Thank you very much, Leader. Good evening. I just wanted to speak briefly on this item, and it's mainly around the fourth recommendation concerning leisure centres. I'll be very careful in terms of what I say, because I am aware that most of that is in exempt. But to Councillor Merriweather's point, this entire budget did come to Value for Money ONS, on which I sit as a member a couple of weeks ago. And I think it's fair to say that we scrutinised everything in great detail. Is also important, I think, to really emphasise how important point 4 is, not just in terms of the impact financially to us. I think when contracts were being prepared many years ago, nobody expected something like this to ever happen. And it's really good that despite this, we seem to have managed to maintain a really good working relationship with our partner, Places Leisure. So I think from our point of view, what we saw when we were on that committee, and also speaking as leader of the Conservative group at Waverley, is as I say, we need to see a swift resolution now, an opening of our leisure centres as soon as is safe and practicable. They represent not just a seriously high volume in terms of income generation for us as a council, but even more importantly, are crucial for so many of our residents throughout the borough who really do depend on them for their health and well-being, and even more so at this critical time. So, as I say, I'm really pleased to see that things are looking more positive on that front, and wholeheartedly support what I hope we will see happening in the very near future, which will be the opening of our leisure centres again. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Potts. I have no hands up for any councillor wishing to speak. Before I move the recommendation, does anyone wish to say anything to this recommendation? Very well, councillors, thank you. It's a bit long and tedious, but I will read it for the benefit of those who do not have the papers in front of them. The recommendations are this executive recommends to council: 1, to acknowledge the forecast variations from the 2020-21 general fund budget listed in Annex 1 and approve the mitigation measures set out in Annex 2, including revisions to approved budgets, the cancellation of approved contributions to reserves, and drawing down of earmarked reserves. Point 2, that in the event of additional government grant being secured and or the overall projections set out in Annex 1 being more favourable than forecast, the net budget surplus arriving from this accrues to the Business Rate Equalisation Fund, property investment fund and the working balance. 3, that a full revision of the approved medium-term financial plan is undertaken, which will assess the adequacy of the contingency budget, consider the other options identified but not included at value at this stage, and the wider economic factors to be reported to Council no later than its December meeting. And point 4, that in relation to the leisure centre issues, the recommendations included in the exempt annex be approved. Councillors, may I ask you to vote with your little green ticks, please, and one of the officers will make sure we have enough.
Green what?
One, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 6 at least. 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1 not here. Am I missing 1 on page 2? Anyway, 8 is sufficient to pass the resolution, so that is agreed. Thank you, councillors. Sorry, Fiona, I should let you have a look at that. As an officer, really ought to scrutinise it rather than me saying it's great.
Thank you. I think some have now taken their hands down, but we've got, yes, we have 9 yeses.
Thank you very much. Okay, if you'd all take your little ticks down, please. We will move on to item 8, recovery, change and transformation, RCT programme. This is really in 2 parts, and there's a lot of paperwork, which I'm sure you will have all had time to look at in reasonable detail, although it's quite a heavy load of stuff. We have the immediate the immediate impact of how we get things going again and how we cope with the results of COVID. And we have the longer term impact as to how our working conditions will change. There is no doubt that although the peak of this particular disease is past, there will be some surprises in the future. But there is a phrase out there saying we want to build back better. And that isn't just buildings. That applies to the way we work and the way our people conduct their daily lives. And our ways of working will change. And they will change due to green achievements, things for better health for our people, cutting down on travel, changing our buildings, and our employees' wishes will be paramount in how we move forward with, I call it sort of restaffing, or restaffing is not quite the right word, but getting people back into the offices. But some people will find it better to work from home for longer periods. Some people are absolutely dying to get back into the office. And obviously what they do will have a lot on it. There are a number of details in what you've seen. The written details are in pages 27 to 31. There are some excellent diagrams illustrating what we're doing, pages 33 to 36. But perhaps the most important thing is from page 37 to 54, there are a list of 10 projects we're running and a very detailed SWOT analysis of how we can achieve it. And that is closely followed by basically a roadmap and a timetable of priorities of how we should do that. That really is a summary of quite a lot that's sitting there. I don't intend to say much else. Does any other councillor wish to say anything? No hands up at the moment. So I will move to the recommendation. And the recommendation is very simple. It is recommended that the executive approves the recovery, change and transformation programs and the medium and longer term project objectives of the 10 projects that form the recovery, change and transformation programs. Could we go for green ticks again, please?
That's 9 members voted, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Fiona. That is therefore unanimously carried. If we pop our green ticks down, I will move on to item 9, Recovery and Devolution White Paper, Local Government. Immediately at the start of this, because things have moved on, I would like to move an amendment to the recommendation. I'm sure I have a seconder.
Yes, you do. Pleased to second, Leader.
And I will ask, if possible, if the new recommendation is put on the screen, and I will read it as well. The recommendation will be amended to say it is recommended that the executive firstly note the Surrey County Council Cabinet Report, the letter from the Surrey County Council leader, Councillor Tim Oliver, to the Secretary of State for Housing, Communities and Local Government, the Right Honourable Robert Jenrick MP, the Waverley Borough Council motion of the 22nd of July 2020, and the letter of the Surrey District and Borough Council leaders to the Secretary of State, dated the 23rd of July, all of which are attached as annexes to this report. Secondly, that we allocate a budget of £10,000 to support preparatory work for a unitary council proposal, which will be different from the Surrey one, clearly. And also that we note that Surrey officers have identified an existing budget where there is a high degree of certainty that an underspend will occur this financial year, which is the mileage and subsistence costs during lockdown period, when people obviously weren't travelling very much, and that under paragraph 4.23 and 4.26 and Annex 1 of the financial regulations, this amount can be wired with officer approval, so a supplementary estimate is not required. If we could take that down now, councillors on the executive, I would ask you all, once that disappears, so that we don't have to discuss everything twice, if you could vote on agreeing that that amendment shall become the substantive item of discussion.
That's agreed, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. I will now introduce this item, and I am aware that we have speakers. Most of you were at council and will have heard me speak on it, so I will try not to repeat and bore you to death on it. You will all be aware that in early July, the government announced that the long-awaited and deferred white paper on devolution was going to be produced this autumn. It's now being headed Recovery and Devolution. On the 10th of July, the leader of Surrey County Council wrote to the Minister requesting that Surrey be allowed to present a proposal for a single unitary council covering the whole of Surrey. A number of other councils also strangely jumped the gun slightly and did much the same. On the 17th of July, the boroughs and district leaders had their normal meeting, at which surprise, I would say fury, and great disappointment was expressed that this letter had been sent off without reference or consultation with any of the borough or district leaders. On the 21st, some days after the letter was sent, this was presented to the Surrey Cabinet, which is an extraordinarily odd way round, but these are timelines. On the 22nd, Waverley Borough Council met and passed the motion with which I'm sure you are all familiar, but for the record, I will read it, saying this council opposes a single Surrey-wide unitary authority. This council recognises principles of localism, many of which are incompatible with a single unitary authority within Surrey. Therefore, Surrey instructs the executive to urgently investigate alternative forms of unitary authorities and the timing of any such reorganisation that may be more advantageous to Waverley and its residents, including any opportunities with neighbouring councils. And whilst all the councillors will be well aware of it, for the benefit of those that might be watching, that was passed by 51 votes in favour, none against, and 2 abstentions. On the 23rd of July, the boroughs and districts, all 11 leaders, signed a letter to the minister asking that they also be invited to present a case for more unitaries. To get all 11 borough and council leaders scattered across the political spectrum to sign a letter such as that, I think was a major triumph and is also a firm expression of the dislike of the Surrey proposal that emanates through the whole of Surrey. That is really all I want to say about it. The government appear to be taking the easy object of just dumping their new ideas onto institutions that already exist, because just asking councils to take on that and abolishing all the districts seems to be the lazy option rather than the thought out option. I have 2 speakers on this, and then I will call members of the executive. First speaker I have is Councillor Robert Knowles.
Thank you very much, Leader, and I welcome your new recommendation. As I think we've already noted Oliver's letter with some disgust. Also, I think you've clarified something that I was going to ask, because at last week's council I put down a written question before I knew it was going to be a motion as to whether the executive or officers at Waverley had been consulted, and you said there was a simple answer, no. And you went on then at some detail similar to tonight, for which I'm grateful. However, in the report of Joanna Killian, on page 72 of our papers, under consulted, she's put that preliminary related discussions had taken place with district and borough leaders and chief executives. It seems from what you've just said that that's not true, because when that report was written, you've just told us no such discussions had taken place. The Surrey County Council report is very poor and has many words but says very little. I did wonder if Sir Humphrey Appleby had written it. Of course, Sir Humphrey, if you Google him, lived in Hazelmere, and I'm sure he would not have approved of this folly. At para 7C, it says a single unitary would cover an area that provides a credible geography for new structures. What rubbish. As officers look out of their London offices at big red buses passing by every minute, they obviously have little knowledge of the geography or natural links in the south of the county. From my ward, for example, a bus does go to Guildford, but most routes follow the natural geography. They go to Midhurst, Alton, Aldershot and Basingstoke. And the trains, although they go to London as most do from all over the country, the other direction they go to Portsmouth and Southsea, Portsmouth Harbour and Southampton Central. Hardly a geographical area based on Kingston. At para 10, it speaks of building on discussions that have been held with districts and boroughs. And from what you say, Leader, that's very questionable. In his letter to the Secretary of State, Oliver highlights establishing the Sea Coal Centre at Headley Court on the outskirts of Epsom, which was and may be a suitable recovery unit for COVID patients. But he fails to say it currently is unused, and Heartland CCG, which now is based in northwest Surrey yet again, would like it to become the diagnostic centre for Surrey, based just outside London. Indeed, under St Helier Hospital, a trust, which is situated in the London borough of Sutton at Carlshorton. A long and impossible journey from Havesmere or Cranley for a colonoscopy, I would suggest. The papers show evidence of a huge Surrey divide, services to be in the north and paid for from the south. Leader, I submit a single Surrey would be a total disaster for our residents. We would be forgotten, if not the ignored few, and local representation would without doubt be abandoned. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Knowles. I now have Councillor John Rubini.
Thank you, Leader. I would like to thank our leader and the leaders of the other boroughs for their united and prompt response to Surrey's plans for a unitary. I cannot agree that Havesmere and Waverley would be best served by this idea. It seems Surrey are keen to take on more responsibilities by getting rid of the boroughs, when in fact they cannot manage what they have now, in particular highways, elderly and youth. I would say the most vulnerable in the community. I would encourage Waverley and our towns and villages to start planning now for their ideas for the future. And I am pleased to see the positive amendment that you're making tonight. If Waverley has to go, then I am convinced that Havesmere, for example, often thought of as in Sussex, should look across Sussex and Hampshire borders for areas of equal size, such as Petersfield and Midhurst. We are a mainly rural area, and our voice could be very quickly dismissed if we were to look north to towns such as Woking or Guildford. So please let us support our community and plans for alternatives to protect this mainly rural area and the most vulnerable. I fully support from what Councillor Robert Knowles has just said. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Rubini. I have Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Leader. First off, just to agree with Councillor Knowles, Sir Humphrey Appleby would not be proud of that report, although I certainly think he would have approved of the push towards rampant centralisation that's at the core of the scheme proposed by the county and its leader. As Councillor Ward has just said, getting 11 boroughs to agree from multiple parties to agree on anything just shows the strength of feeling that there is on this. And Councillor Rubini is quite correct. Representation will suffer, and I wait to see when we see the white paper in full if it really does devolve any powers to towns and parish councils, which many of the Surrey MPs keep talking about, like it's absolutely going to happen. And certainly, as much as for many people in this room of all parties, the idea of planning powers coming down to towns and parishes and other powers of similar nature, whilst that might be attractive, it does not seem to be compatible with the government's general mood to centralise every aspect of local government towards the upper tier. So whilst the MPs are talking about that, I really don't understand how it's compatible with their own party's politics at present. And I would be very surprised to see that outlined in a white paper. Just to very briefly speak on the additional element added today, members of the executive, as well as I think almost every member of full council, were, I think, seized of the need to act quickly, and this amendment tonight brings forward some funds to do that. The other intention of this is to put a marker in the sand for the 11 borough, the other 10 boroughs to act similarly, so that we hopefully can act in a unified way in order to put up an alternative business case to what the county is proposing. So my hope tonight is that we can agree this. We will see similar actions from our brothers in arms, brothers and sisters in arms across Surrey over the next few weeks. Thank you very much, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor. I have Councillor Nick Palmer.
Thank you very much. I just had a couple of points. One thing which mystifies me is the sheer speed with which this is being addressed. Firstly, I'm puzzled that the government feels that the national situation is one that is conducive to a massive local government reorganisation. Without wishing to criticise national policy on the virus or on Brexit at this point. It's not relevant here, but we are obviously in serious national difficulty, and a rush to change the way that local government functions is something which seems inappropriate at a time of national crisis. What seems even more mysterious is that Surrey County Council are so eager to press their controversial plans that they've rushed ahead with their application before the government's proposals are even laid out. So we are eager to join this new arrangement before we know what it is. And that makes very little sense. And it means that issues such as the absence of parish and town councils across much of the county are not addressed, because we don't actually know whether the government's proposals will foresee empowerment of town and parish councils, and what they propose should be done in the event that no such councils exist. I very much welcome the cross-party response to this. I think it's healthy, and I think that with luck we will arrive at a better outcome as a result of a constructive dialogue. I will make the point that if we are to have representation grouped at a higher level, in other words, if we are to get rid of district councils and concentrate at unitary level, then it becomes more important that we look at proportional representation in one form or another. And because of the government's interest in a mayoral system, despite the drawbacks and additional costs of that, I think we might also usefully look at the London assembly system of additional members, which would address that particular aspect. But broadly, I simply want to support the comments already made by the leader and deputy leader, and indeed by the members of the Conservative opposition. Let's move forward on this, but let's move forward at a sensible pace, rather than feeling that there's a clock ticking and that at all costs local government must be totally reorganised and sections of it destroyed because of some imaginary timetable.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. I have Councillor Peter Clark.
Thank you, Leader. Most speakers this evening so far have mentioned the lack of consultation. Now, the most important part of consultation in this exercise will be with the electorate. And the best opportunity for the electorate to have their say in this matter will be at the county council elections, as long as they take place. And I would support that we all fight tooth and nail to make sure that these county council elections take place and the electorate have their say on this matter. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have any more speakers? Okay, then before I go to the recommendation, if I can answer a few of the queries that were raised and sum up. The Surrey papers for that infamous meeting were written some time ago. The first that we had in anything that might be called a consultation, if you stretch the definition almost beyond its elastic limit, was on the 17th of July at the regular Surrey leaders meeting, leaders of boroughs and districts, at which the leader of Surrey attended for the first half hour. he went away to another meeting, and I had various descriptions of his appearance when he got there, but I think chastened was the nicest word I heard. He was, in that half hour, all 11 boroughs, I think, managed to speak, and they were not happy and a little less than polite sometimes. So the papers were written before any leaders had been, let's be kind, met. And we had half an hour with the leader of Surrey before the actual cabinet meeting on the 21st, but well after those papers were written saying there had been what he called consultation. A lot of people that I've spoken to, some leaders have said, let's wait till September and see what comes out. Now, I understand, I talked to our own MP, and I understand all the MPs are 100% behind this proposal. And I just wonder what they've been told and by whom. But I think it is vital that they are disabused as fast as possible, as quickly as possible even, that this is wrong. And I noticed even in Hertfordshire, all 10 districts have come out against their county's proposals. Here in Surrey, all 11 have come out against their county's proposals. We were verbally, but not yet in writing, as leaders of districts and boroughs, offered the chance of joining in the Surrey work on this, so that we could work alongside Surrey officers in coming up with a proposal that would be for the best for Surrey. Now, I and many others found this a little strange in that the proposal has already been sent in. So what were we working towards? And to work alongside Surrey officers trying to do something different didn't seem to me as though they might be wholeheartedly in favour of helping us, and might be more interested in sucking out all our potential arguments against it and putting them into their paper. Because for them to help us, one has to just quote the turkeys for Christmas. There's no way any Surrey officer is going to be keen on this proposal being anything other than an increase in Surrey's responsibility, size, and potentially salaries. So that was part of why I felt we needed a sum of money on the table today, as has been alluded to earlier, to kickstart the process. 10,000 won't go very far, but hopefully it will encourage our other boroughs and district leaders to do likewise. And if we have 110,000, we could do a effectively rival study that would probably have some teeth, and for £110,000 we could get something. So I hope I've summed up correctly. I hope I've answered any of the queries that were, and I won't read it again because it's been on the screen. If we could put it to the vote, please, with little green ticks.
That's 9 green ticks, leader. So that's passed.
Thank you very much, Fiona. And for the sake of fairness and conformity, I ought to emphasize you are actually allowed to use the little red crosses. I just thought I'd draw your attention to the one I thought you might need. But I wouldn't like anybody to come back later and say I had hidden away your ability to refuse it. Okay, councillors, thank you very much for that. We now move the portfolio holder, Councillor Nick Palmer.
Yes, thank you, Leader. As many of you will be aware, the very attractive site that we have at Frensham Ponds has been in tremendous demand after the end of lockdown, to the point that it was frankly overloaded. We saw many instances where social distancing was being ignored. There are also really remarkable levels of litter which were left, as well as illegal parking on the main road when the car park became full. This put our staff under intolerable pressures, and it's also led to one of our most attractive sites being made relatively unpleasant because of the conditions in which it was left. So what we decided to do is to seek additional help from East Hampshire, with whom we worked before, to provide additional officers to enforce the litter regulations, issue fines where they're violated, which will normally be for £100, and to restore the beach and the area to the level that we would like it and which we've traditionally had it. We are asking residents when there's particularly attractive sunny days to try to visit other locations while we restore conditions at Frensham. There's been some improvement over the last few days, and we hope that that improvement will be maintained. But I would like to express particular thanks to the rangers, the officers of the council, who've been working under great difficulty to try to ensure that the site is maintained in decent condition.
Thank you, Councillor. I see no hands at the moment. Does any member of the executive wish to speak? In that case, I will read the recommendation and then put it to the vote. The recommendation is that the executive authorises the head of environmental and regulatory services to procure additional enforcement resources on a cost-neutral basis from external providers during periods of peak demand, as and when required, in consultation with the portfolio holder for operational and enforcement services. Members of the executive, if you could vote using either your green or your red button.
That's 9 votes in favour of that, Leader, so that's passed.
Thank you very much indeed, Fiona. Item 11, pavement licensing. We have withdrawn this item as it's going to be considered later by the Licensing and Regulatory Committee. So we will move straight to item 12, which is a property matter and is in the hands of Councillor Merriweather.
Thank you, Leader. So earlier on, I referenced our medium-term financial plan, which currently includes a significant increase in property investment to drive an increase in property rental income of the order of £1.2 million per year by 2023-24. Our general fund property investment strategy is to pursue opportunities for us to invest in buying or building appropriate general fund property assets, not only in return for rental income to us, but also for the wider benefit of all of our residents, as set out in our corporate strategy. We recognise that within our general fund activities, our corporate goals and asset yields are most likely to be fulfilled from the responsible development of residential open market rental homes on land we already own, and so by definition don't have to go out and buy on the open market. But by definition, these projects will also have the longest lead times and ultimately can only form one class in our overall property portfolio. But our job is to build better for the long term. So the Berries is one such longer term development project. Now, we've discussed this at length already in prior meetings. In addition to the PID itself and the officer report on pages 101 to 114 of your packs, they detail the history of the site and this project. These are further to reports and papers behind the executive's decision taken on the 7th of January 2020, pre-COVID, which I clarified further to the executive still on the 3rd of March. So I don't intend to repeat those comments this evening or, for that matter, duplicate the report now in today's agenda pack itself. Other to note that this PID, I do believe, has been drafted to reflect the very constructive feedback that the whole process to date has generated. And just to note that this PID was recommended by the Property Investment Advisory Board at its meeting on the 1st of July this year. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Merriweather. I have Councillor Follows.
Thank you, Leader. And I just very quickly want to say thank you, Mark, and the team for taking on board a number of the concerns made by members generally, but especially Godalming members, and further expressed by Godalming Town Council. I suppose something that has a bit of a more renewed relevance as part of the unitary discussions, but the continued presence of Waverley Borough Council in Godalming is important to the sustainability of the town centre in terms of footfall, as is the continued existence of at least the current level of car parking to support the town centre. Both of these are issues that you addressed in the report, and I fully hope that some levels of improvement to the parking in Godalming, particularly in Crown Court, can actually be realised as part of this too. But thank you for dealing with both those two major queries that Godalming Town Council and Godalming members raised. And of course, also very happy to support a project that's going to be supporting a number of our other strategic principles: increasing social housing, supporting the financial sustainability of the council, supporting the local economies of Waverley and Godalming, and trying to do so in an environmentally sustainable way, and in this way more literally than usual, to build back better. So thank you very much, Mark, and the team.
Thank you, Councillor Follows. I have no other hands up. In that case, we will move to the vote. The recommendation is, it is recommended that the executive approves the PID for the Berries Development Project. Can we go for red or green, please?
That's 9 green ticks, so that's recommendation is passed, Leader.
Thank you very much, Fiona. We now have something on pink paper, which, as we all know, is an exempt item. I therefore have to move a motion to exclude the public, which regrettably I have to read in full, which I have to then ask for your approval. The recommendation is that, pursuant to Procedure Rule 20, and in accordance with section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following item, on the grounds that it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during these items, there would be disclosure of them of exempt information as defined by section 1001 of the Act, of the description specified at the meeting in the revised Part 1, Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972. In short, I wish to go to exempt. Councillors, could I please have a red or green?